All those pieces supported the key ingredient to Brand Markle, but there was one more key ingredient, and that was she needed to assert herself as a strong Democrat. Those were the people she needed by her side, because those are the people that are going to aid you in Hollywood. So on the eve of the fractious presidential election, in the midst of the COVID crisis, the Sussexes supported Joe Biden against Donald Trump. The president's low poll rating suggested his defeat. Keen to play a part in Trump's humiliation, Meghan enjoyed a virtual meeting with Gavin Newsom, California's Democrat governor. Must have been a real interesting meeting. Thereafter, she and Harry broadcast a message to Americans from their Montecito garden, celebrating their inclusion as one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people on the planet. Meghan urged Americans to build communities of compassion and spoke about the most important election of our lifetime. In a clear anti-Trump appeal, Harry asked Americans to register to vote.
As we approach this November, it's vital we reject hate speech, misinformation, and online negativity.
Okay, I have just a couple things to say about this. First of all, I'm not surprised that they made it into Times Magazine's 100 most influential people on the planet. The truth is, they themselves had done nothing, but everybody made them more important than they needed to be. To have left them off the list would have been odd, not because they have done anything that's all that important, but because the world made them important. The world gave them way more of a platform than they should have. But that aside, I think the most egregious thing about this entire part is that Harry has no business preaching to us about what we should do in our election. Regardless of how you feel about it, nobody wants a prince who's never been allowed to come out and have any kind of political expressions in public. He's never been able to take sides. So, I mean, it almost is like, well, what in your background has ever given you the right to come out and speak? But more than that, you're a foreigner. How dare you come to us and tell us how we ought to vote? You don't know anything about our politics. You are not somebody that I'm coming to being like, now who should I vote for again? Could you educate me about the choices? I just don't know. What do you think, Harry? You know, it's like, how dare you come to me? You know, you are new to our country, so you don't need to come up in here and start lecturing us about,
don't forget to register to vote. If you want change, you've got to ask for it. Don't forget to vote Donald Trump out.
It's like, regardless of how you're going to vote, Harry, if you even can, was he even a citizen at that point? I don't know. Is he even a citizen now? Regardless of any of that, you don't need to lecture us about how it's going to be. You just don't get you don't have the right to do that. You literally showed up on the scene 10 minutes ago. And now you're sitting in the mansion gardens to tell me how I need to get my act together to vote. Why don't you get your act together and get your ass back to your country? The Sandringham agreement for the couple to uphold the values of Her Majesty was broken. Obviously, he's not allowed to talk about politics. You know, he had agreed to continue to act royal even though he was no longer part of the working royal family. But as soon as he gets there, he's over there blabbing, you know,
don't forget to vote out that misogynistic nightmare.
Regardless of your feelings about Trump, we don't need Harry to tell us what to do next. Endorsement of a political party was not acceptable for the royal family. On reflection, Harry's snub of Ivanka Trump during her visit to Buckingham Palace with her father in December had been clearly inspired by Meghan. Meghan had not appeared at that state dinner in Buckingham Palace for Trump. Her partisanship did not surprise the president. I'm not a fan of hers, he said. I wish a lot of luck to Harry because he's going to need it. The question was whether Harry would loyally abide by the other terms of the Sandringham Agreement and to the Queen, or would he adopt Meghan's attitude? Are we really asking this question at this point? I mean, he had no intentions of doing any of those things. He's just going to go through life doing his own thing. He's going to run his own program. The Sandringham Agreement was just the permission he had to leave. He probably doesn't even know what it says. At the same time, Harry followed Meghan's lead into the most sensitive issues. Meghan had supported Joe Biden's government removal of gender identity from official statements. Making the terms mother, father, daughter, and brother unacceptable was part of the administration's policy to obliterate biological sex. Now, part of this problem for Meghan is just that it is, once again, not surprisingly, incoherent when it comes to what she personally stands on right? Because she stands on, I am a woman. I am a feminist. I am a mother. All of these things that she uses to define herself will now no longer be relevant if that kind of language is obliterated from like the public conversation. If it is offensive to use the term mother, if it is offensive to define yourself as a woman in any sort of traditional way, then how can Meghan stand on that anymore? You know? And so many of the things that Meghan stands on, she's not looking to the end conclusion. It's just right now, how is this going to make me well known? Right now, how is this going to help me? Right now, how will this make my star shine brighter? But she's not thinking, how am I going to play this out in the long run? And part of that comes back to bite her, because in 2020, when we were seeing so much racial division, so much antagonism in the society, there were so many protests, there was so much anger and rage just flowing through the streets. The movement that Meghan had jumped on began to get stranger and stranger, and more, and I mean, farther and farther from like the middle ground where most people are comfortable functioning. So Meghan had jumped on this bandwagon, but it was starting to take off in a direction she knew was not sustainable for most Americans. Meghan's support for cancel culture included the censorship of her opponents like Trump on Facebook and Twitter. And it doesn't matter so much what you think about Trump. A lot of people in the center and even people left of center could see that saying that Trump could no longer speak on Twitter was problematic for free speech in general, right? Regardless of what you thought about him, that move is going to snowball, because what if next time what if next time it's your guy? You know, what are you going to do now? If the rule is when we don't like you, we can take you away and silence you. Well, what if it ends up being somebody that you don't want silenced? You know, if you can make those kinds of rules, if you can say free speech for all, but not that guy, how's that not going to come after you eventually? So people were starting to be like, oh, we might be getting into some dicey territory. But it got worse, because though she had supported Black Lives Matter was moving in a more radical direction than maybe even she was willing to move in. Black Lives Matter proposed the cancellation of presidents like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Abraham Lincoln because they had owned slaves. Abraham Lincoln never owned slaves. So I don't think that's not a correct statement. But George Washington and Thomas Jefferson had. Others wanted to ban classical literature books because they were allegedly racist. For the moment, remembering that Harry's misstep and hers about the Commonwealth had exposed them to criticism, she resisted joining the extreme end of the movement. But the problem is, the race issue had become too important in their careers for her to ignore the reasonable debate. This is the problem that people often get in when they join a movement, not because it's their core belief system, but because they think it's going to bring favor to them. Because what you realize is, I'm never going to be woke enough. You're never going to be woke enough for the mob. There's going to be a point that you're like, okay, this is my line, I don't cross that. And the mob's going to come after you and say, yeah, but if you really cared, you would. Right? So now Meghan's just in a mess. And she can't back off of the things she said, but she can't necessarily go forward either. She's just going to make everybody angry. So what she has to just keep doing is saying, but I'm a victim, you know? Don't come after me. I'm the victim. Ever since writing the Elle article in 2015 about her experience of race, Meghan had spoken as the victim of racism. Although she provided no specific evidence of suffering any personal disadvantage, she explained that after returning from Britain, she realized that America's racial tensions were devastating. She added, "It was so sad to see where our country was." After the murder of George Floyd in May 2020, she found a, quote, silver lining. Across America, the peaceful protests, people were actually owning their own role. It shifted from sadness to a feeling of absolute inspiration because I can see the tide is turning. In Meghan's opinion, the Black Lives Matter movement was a beautiful thing. She accepted BLM's arguments about white privilege and saddling whites with their guilt of oppression. Although critics labeled BLM as Marxists fomenting social discontent, Harry shared her opinion about white man's guilt. We'll get to Harry's opinion in a minute. it's hard to read this stuff now on the other side of BLM having been exposed as a complete and total fraud. And, now we read this stuff and it's like, it's kind of old news. I mean, it's not like a gotcha moment for Meghan, because a lot of people thought BLM was a movement to get on the back of. Remember all the black squares all over Instagram? Everybody wanted to come out and show support, It was the thing to do. And so, you want to point a finger at Meghan and be like, how could you be so wrong? Well, how were so many people wrong about that movement? They were very clear about what they wanted. They were very clear about how they wanted to go about breaking things, though they seem to have no written solution for how to build it back once it was broken. There's a lot of things in our country that are messed up, that could be reorganized, rebuilt. But I don't know if breaking things without a solution is a grand plan, right? That's what a child would do. But an adult comes in not to break down, but to figure out how can I take the pieces in front of me and reorganize them into something that is helping not just the few, but the many. Anyway, I mean, I'm not a politician, but it really seemed fairly obvious that BLM was just there to incite rage and violence and more social and racial unrest than it was in solving problems. Harry, though, because he's just poor thing, I mean, he just can't keep up in this kind of environment. He's literally just mimicking everything he's hearing. So he came out and he criticized white people, which I always find it so insufferable when white people come out and criticize white people. I'm like, you're damning yourself. Do you not understand what you're saying right now? I mean, what is your solution? If your take on white people is as they're terrible, horrible, evil, vindictive nightmares that are looking to wipe out anybody with any melanin in their skin, if that's what you think, how do you get out of bed in the morning? There's nothing you can do about the color of your skin, white Harry. So what are you going to do about that? Just coming out and repeating the same statements about how terrible white people are, that's gross. No, we're not. Yeah, there have been white people who've done bad things. There's been people of every color that have done bad things. Who are you at the heart? What are you about? What solutions do you have? But coming out and that's a zero help to anyone. Harry criticized a world created by white people for white people. And he specifically went after England. See, Harry and Meghan, having come from a country that never even owned slaves to a country that did have slaves, that in and of itself is ironic. But the fact that he now wants to come after England, what did England do about any of this? They didn't have anything to do with George Floyd. Why are they getting pulled into it? Harry wants to attack England, and he said in an interview from Montecito that England was suffering from structural racism. Institutional racism is endemic across society. White society produced bias with an effect on young people of colour. White Britons need to understand people of a different coloured skin. Even the way he is saying this is like somebody who doesn't really know what they're saying. I mean, it doesn't even feel like he believes any of this. Influenced by Meghan's experience, he added, when you go into a shop with your children and you see only white doors, do you think, that's weird, there's not a black door there? White Britons benefit from racism. It's too stupid. This is the problem with society. How can we exist in a society that is so dumb? It makes me feel frustrated because we keep talking about the same old things when we've solved that problem, but we're getting dumber on the subject. I'm tired of living in a world that is we could be having real, super interesting conversations right now. We have so much technology. We're such an interesting people. We have so much going for us. We've got so much diversity. There's so many interesting conversations to have. So many great books to be written. So many wonderful films to be made. So many incredible plays. So much amazing poetry. So many beautiful paintings. So many incredible sculptures. We have too many minds that are brilliant to be having conversations like this. We are too smart a people to be acting like this. We have come so far since the dawn of time. And this is the stuff we're talking about? My mind can't handle it. I'm so tired of how dumb everything is. All right, rant over. Harry's little comment about, have you ever seen a black doll in a shop? Well, it's not 1952. Somehow Thomas Markle was able to rustle up a couple of black dolls so he could make a black and white family of dolls. And that was in the 80s or early 90s. It's kind of like, remember when Joe Biden came out, not recently, but like a couple years ago, and was like, where are all the black people on TV? And it's like, have you turned on the TV since 1951? There's some black people on TV. You know, it's like, what are you talking about? And that's what I feel like Harry was like, have you ever seen a black doll in a shop? Yeah, quite a few of them. What are you talking about? He and Meghan are both so behind on the cultural topic. She's still trying to make like brilliant points that were made back in like 1975 about feminism. He's over there trying to ask you if you've ever seen a black doll. It's like, do you guys, are you in a time warp? What is happening? All right, well, he's not done talking about London. He said the real problem in London was it just wasn't sufficiently diverse. Son, London is your hometown. You don't know that 40% of the people in London are ethnic and have ethnic backgrounds? The mayor of, okay, this cracked me up. Like I was dying at the end of this paragraph because he says there's no diversity in London. Okay, well, let's start with the mayor. The mayor of London was the son of a Pakistani bus driver. His main rival in the last election was from a Jamaican family. The Home Secretary was the daughter of Ugandan Asian refugees. The Chancellor of the Exchequer was an Indian Hindu. The Foreign Secretary's Jewish father arrived in Britain from Czechoslovakia in 1938 to escape the Nazis. The government's business secretary and educational secretary were children of immigrants from Africa. But where's the diversity? There's none to be found in London. Trevor Phillips, a black commentator, criticized the Sussexes for styling themselves as the next generation of trailblazers in their introduction of a new TV show called Black History Month. The Sussexes TV program, wrote Phillips, made me want to look away. Not only was their program similar to Britain's Black History Month broadcast since 1987, but their video said less about Black Britain and more about a couple pleading, "Let me entertain you." Phillips' comments probably never reached the Sussexes. Negativity was banned in Montecito. It usually is, and wherever a tyrant reigns, nary can a negative word be said.